uh, this action will eliminate any background noise that may disturb our presenters. There will be a question and answer period at the end of the presentations. In our efforts to make this forum more viable, there is now an evaluation sheet, a link for this particular forum. Tonight, the forum will be divided into two sections. The first section will deal with the designing of curriculum, and the second section will deal with the implementation and the results of such curriculum. At this time, I would like to turn this over to Ian Brandon to talk about the links that have been added and to welcome any guests.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Patrick, for the introduction. I am Ian Brandon, again, the Satellite Office Supervisor here with JCPS. And at this time, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge any board members that may be present. As I kind of look through the room here, I don't see any that have joined as of yet. But I will also like to extend a greeting on behalf of Chief John Marshall of the Diversity, Equity, and Poverty Department. And as Ms. Patrick mentioned, we have a few links that we will be dropping into the chat. One will be a sign-in link for any JCPS attendees that will be receiving any credit. And the second link will be a link to our form evaluation. And so what we would like to do is continue to get better with these forums, so your input is valuable to that success. And just again, as a reminder, we are looking to create a safe and positive space here. So we want to keep all comments in the chat positive, especially when we get to the question and answer period. And at this time, I would like to return it back to you, Ms. Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Tonight, the forum will focus on culturally responsive curriculum, and we have several experts here tonight to talk to us about that. Right now, I am going to read you the bios of our presenters, and I'm very proud to start with Ms. Cook. Ms. Cook has worked for Jefferson County Public Schools for 8 years, teaching English and African American literature at Butler Traditional High. She is currently working as an anti-racist specialist in the Department of Diversity, Equity, and Poverty. As an anti-racist specialist, her work focuses on coaching and supporting classroom teachers in the pursuit of culturally responsive pedagogy and practices, as well as coaching and supporting school leaders in racially equitable leadership. Our second guest is Ms. Klein. Ms. Klein has worked for Jefferson County Public Schools as a middle school language arts teacher for 10 years. She has served as an equity and inclusive, equity and inclusive resource teacher in the department DEP, and that is again the Department of Equity, Diversity, Equity, and Poverty, and is currently working as a specialist of anti-racist pedagogy. In the Department of Diversity, Equity, and Poverty, Ms. Klein designs professional development, culturally responsive lesson plans and units, and organizing and facilitating professional development institutes. Ms. Moore Rodriguez is a specialist for the Department of Equity and Poverty program in Jefferson County Public Schools. Ms. Moore Rodriguez has served as a resource teacher and a literacy coach and a reading recovery teacher. She has presented on various literacy topics at both the district and the national level. I'm going to turn this over to them right now, and they can begin to share their knowledge with us.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you for the invitation to be here tonight. We're so excited. We do not take this lightly. We appreciate all of you spending your time here with us tonight. So something that we want to spend a little bit of time on is the Affirming Racial Equity tool. which to us is how our teachers plan that culturally responsive instruction that we're looking for. It's a resource that's going to help them get to what we're looking for when it comes to culturally responsive teaching. So let's dig into that. Avon. So I don't want to spend too much time here. This is really just a great graphic that we share with our school leaders to kind of think about what racial equity looks like as a cycle throughout the whole school year. So you'll see it's a flow chart that starts on the left and moves to the right, but really it's just a good graphic on the work that we want to see happening in schools throughout the year. So this is what we want to spend some time on tonight, the Affirming Racial Equity tool. So what is this? First of all, it's a resource. It's a resource that we want to make sure our teachers are utilizing to help them incorporate more racially equitable practices into the curriculum, instruction, and pedagogy. The audience for this is very broad. Specifically, we want to make sure that our teachers are utilizing this to plan instruction in their professional learning communities. So those planning sessions that happen weekly when we're thinking about what we want to teach our students next. It's also very much so important to our academic instructional coaches. It's a tool that they can use to utilize to coach teachers on their instruction and give feedback specifically on culturally responsive teaching, and then take that back to our professional learning communities to think about next steps and the ways that we're going to build out and make our curriculum whole. And finally, we've got our assistant principals and our principals. This is something that our administration can use to think about generating items to look for during observations or walkthroughs. So in that way, it comes back to them coaching teachers as well through that lens of culturally responsive teaching. So we've got all layers of the schoolhouse using this and getting stronger when it comes to looking for what culturally responsive teaching is. So when is this used, you all? We want to make sure that it is something that is used. Amy, can you go back over? We want to make sure that it is something that is used weekly throughout the planning process, because that way, if we're utilizing that tool on a regular basis, then of course we become more fluid and more comfortable with it. To the right there, you can see the 6 components of the R tool. Very briefly, they are content integration, knowledge construction, prejudice elimination, equitable pedagogy, empowering classroom culture, and finally, R through assessment. So utilizing this tool, we know is going to get us to that targeted instruction and that targeted coaching and feedback that our teachers need in order to plan that culturally responsive instruction. So what is the purpose of this? We want to make sure that the R tool, the Affirming Racial Equity tool, is at the center of all lesson and unit planning that goes on in the school's building. Because this work comes from our racial equity pillar, we need to make sure that our policy, that we're adhering to the tenets of our policy. And that pertains specifically to curriculum, instruction, and assessment being diverse. And it makes sure that our teachers are engaging in pedagogy and practices that really support those and supports the policy. Anti-bias instruction, anti-racist instruction, to make sure as a whole district, we are moving towards that racially equitable and sustaining teaching. And so as resources to teachers, we want to make sure that they have supports in order to do this work. So a guidebook was built in order to help teachers have one place to go so that they can find all the materials and have access to the resources that they need to engage with this work with authenticity. And so with that being said, of course, our classroom teachers really are the heartbeat of this work. And the more of them that utilize this tool will make such a difference for our students. So we do have expectations for how this is utilized. We want to make sure that people understand the parameters, understand what we expect. And so, of course, it is expected to be used in the PLC process, the professional learning process. We want to make sure that at the beginning of a grading period, our professional learning communities are sitting down and having conversations through the lens of the R tool based on where they feel their strengths and their weaknesses are. After having that conversation, then we're thinking about our targeted next steps and focuses in the R tool for us to review the resources and get stronger in that section so that we're not staying stagnant and being comfortable in one component of the R tool, but instead growing in all areas of the R tool. And so for us, our expectation is that the R tool is embedded across the year. We'll hear a little bit more specifics about what that looks like and the components, but we want to make sure that all the information that is contained in the R tool is not present in just one unit. We want to make sure that is present across the year. And so thinking about making sure that the certain descriptors are embedded within what we're teaching, that's going to help us make sure that we hit every aspect and teachers are growing in every aspect of the R tool. And our academic coaches are going to continue to receive support from us. As a specialist last year, we had touch points with the AICs yearly. We've gotten to meet with them once this year. Hopefully, we'll get to have a touch point with them next month. And so they are the school's leaders when it comes to that first point of contact for racial equity. They have the most updated resources and access and know where that information is to be able to answer some of those questions at the school level as they come up. Aiden.
Thank you so much, Lamanda. We are very aware of our time. I made the joke before everyone came on that we can be long-winded because we tend to make a lot of tools, a lot of guidelines, and we really do want to be helpful to our classroom educators and to our amazing school leaders like Dr. Cosby and Dr. Hunter. So in just a brief handful of minutes, I'm going to give you all a bit of a breakdown of the R tool itself before I turn it over to Ms. Rachel Klein to talk about some of the supports and some of the work that we've seen done through those supports around the R tool. So first and foremost, this is very much grounded in the JCPS racial equity policy. The things that we are seeking to see, the things that we are seeking to do, all impact the racial equity policy as it relates to diversity in curriculum, instruction, and in assessment. So as we are digging into the R tool, the connections to the racial equity pillar are going to be very clear, but it is a firm belief, not only of myself and my teammates, but of Dr. John Marshall, our Chief Equity Officer, that equity is everyone's responsibility. The JCPS racial equity policy is district-wide. So we are growing not just our teachers and our teacher leaders, but our school leaders of what this work looks like. So one thing that we do want to highlight tonight is that those 6 components of the R tool Lamanda gave you, that I will give you a brief overview of, don't just align or live in the racial equity pillar. They align with the backpack of success skills and with culture and climate. So you will hear teachers who are fluent in the affirming racial equity tool talk about how it's just good teaching. It is what is best for our kids. So it's what we want to see happening. So we'll talk through these briefly, but understand that we strive to integrate this work. We want it to live everywhere, and we want everyone, regardless of their lived experiences or their number of years in education or in the district, to feel ownership in this work and to feel pride in the work that they're doing with our kids every day. So as we're going through, keep this larger kind of picture in the back of your mind and know that we will make connections to it as we can. So as we said, 3 of the 6 components of the R tool do really beautifully align with the backpack of success skills, meaning they're focused very intentionally on the content, the materials students interact with. So the very first is content integration, and it's looking at the various cultural groups and demographics that might be displayed in a given lesson or a unit of study. So those lesson descriptors then are encouraging teachers to think about balanced perspectives, positive, unbiased representations of people who may frequently be presented as a stereotype or in a negative light. With knowledge construction, it's very much looking at what the kids then do with that information. So when it is relevant to the content, are we encouraging kiddos to talk about things like bias and oppression? Are we as classroom educators well positioned and supported to really think about issues of institutional and systemic racism and how they impact even perceptions of knowledge? So the lesson descriptors in knowledge construction look very purposefully at the kind of practical and real world applications that students might leverage to extend that content knowledge and or their mastery of standards. And then of course, Arthur assessment is making sure that students have choice and voice in how they demonstrate their mastery. If we really want to say that we care about kids, we have to admit that grades are a snapshot. Not all kids learn at the same rate. So those lesson descriptors in Arthur assessment encourage things like feedback, active coaching from our classroom educators. If you read through it and you're familiar with things like standards-based grading, it's going to feel very familiar so that our students feel not just supported through that coaching and feedback from their teacher, but in the larger system of how they're graded and how assessment occurs, so that it really is capturing their growth, not necessarily whether or not they can recall the events that occurred in a particular book. So those three align with the backpack of success skills. The three that align with culture and climate lead with prejudice elimination. If you explore the R tool, you'll notice these lesson descriptors frequently begin with the teacher will, because it's what we call self-work. So it's our classroom educators being certain that they understand the implicit biases they carry, because we all have them, but being knowledgeable about them helps us plan around them so that we are showing affirming examples from diverse individuals, people who are being represented in affirming ways in non-traditional roles and traditional roles, so that students truly understand we are a wide array of people, especially here in JCPS with all of the different languages, ethnicities, religions. So prejudice elimination helps classroom educators think about how to purposefully interact with those biases and plan through them, so that we're not just building empathetic kids, we're building kids with a global understanding and an appreciation for the diversity here in Louisville. And then of course, with equitable pedagogy, if you have ever heard words like differentiation or accommodations, this takes it a step further. We still want those things to happen, but we also want classroom educators to think very purposely about the very strategies and methods that they're using to teach. Are they things that feel culturally familiar to the students in their classroom? And we know that those can vary from year to year. We were talking today with a principal about how the moratorium on evictions has ended. So we're going to unfortunately see mobility across our district. Are classroom educators equipped to respond to the changes that are occurring sometimes weekly or monthly in their buildings? And are we ensuring that the strategies we're using are going to benefit our Black and Brown students? And then of course, empowering classroom culture, how a classroom feels, how school feels when you walk into it. These lesson descriptors encourage our classroom educators to purposely plan for solid classroom community, which of course we know extends to the school community, where our caregivers and our stakeholders are equal participants. They are seen, they're safe, and they are valued. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel. I have no idea how much time we have left, but I know that she is up to the challenge of kind of sharing how we operationalize this and how we've been supporting its implementation.
Thank you, Avon and Lamanda, for providing such clarity around the how and the why of the R tool. So, of course, we want implementation to be digestible and functional. So we have designed many supports that really allow it to be brought to life. So I want to share some of those with you all as we continue to move forward. So we know that for our instruction to be as reflective and responsive as it needs to be to allow our students to really feel fulfilled in the classroom and feel affirmed, then we understand the necessity for planning to be very intentional. And so there are groups of teachers called professional learning communities who work together to analyze achievement data, and they look at their students and they look at progress, and they ask themselves very intentional questions in a very methodical fashion.
Rachel,
And so, ma'am.
I'm going to
Yes.
interrupt you very quickly. I'm sorry, because I can hear you. We have a couple people having sound issues. I'm just trying to figure out if that's a widespread issue or isolated to maybe just a few people.
Okay, thank you.
For those with screens on, could we just get a thumbs up that you all can hear Rachel? Okay, Rachel, apologies, take it away.
No, no problem. No problem. Thank you for making sure that everybody has an opportunity to hear this. So when teachers sit down together and they plan effective lesson plans and they select curriculum and resources and materials, then they go through some steps that allow them to do that effectively. And we want to ensure that the Affirming Racial Equity tool falls into lockstep with that process. So we have taken measures to align that to those steps to provide yet again more clarity and functionality around the purpose of the R tool, and to really help people understand that it is not extra. It is something that should already be going on in classrooms. And when we bring the R tool into that process, then it really truly makes it as intentional as we can. So that is a resource that is available to all JCPS teachers across the district. An additional layer to that process, we know that there are, of course, varying approaches to planning, depending on whether you're planning for primary students, intermediate students, and all the way up through the secondary grades up through high school. So in addition to making sure that this is digestible for grade levels, we also want to ensure that our content areas feel confident in bringing racial equity into their conversations. And so that is where the R across the content areas fall into play. And we have worked with individuals across the district for a couple of years to really help us think through how the R tool can be given life, no matter whether it's the science classroom, the performing arts classroom, the English language arts classroom, and so on and so forth. So this document here just gives some additional clarity and conversation points when it really comes down to making sure that we are looking at the content area in which we might be providing instruction and bringing that touch point of affirming racial equity into the conversation. Yet another opportunity to see the ways in which the R tool stretches across the district. We know that we don't want to operate in silos. That isolation is not effective. And so we understand that supports come to our teachers and our staff from a variety of different departments and lanes. And so we wanted to acknowledge that the support that we provide by way of our resources and our anchor documents, we certainly hope that it complements the work of other departments, such as multi-tiered systems of support, or the work of the curriculum design and learning innovation team, and so on and so forth. So this has been designed to create some fluidity and some consistency between and among the supports that teachers and staff are receiving from all district support departments, including diversity, equity, and poverty. So to allow the R tool to be visible in the classroom, we spent some time looking very critically at what are the aspects of the R tool that would be visible should a visitor, a guest, a principal, an academic instructional coach, should they step into a classroom, what might they be able to see manifesting before their very eyes? So my colleagues made it clear that there are some aspects of the R tool that are purely reflective for the individual or the group of teachers who are planning instruction. And so that may not be readily visible when a teacher is delivering instruction. We wanted to give our principals and our academic instructional coaches a means of seeing the R tool, so to speak. And so we have designed a walkthrough that is a perfect complement to the R tool. And it is not evaluative. It is simply a means of conversation, growth, perhaps focusing in on a particular component of it as a means of studying it and getting better at it and witnessing growth throughout a school year. So this document here delineates the moves that a teacher and maybe an academic instructional coach, a principal, might engage in before a walkthrough. And then that walkthrough occurs, and then there's some guidance for what might need to happen after that walkthrough. What kind of coaching might that individual need? What kind of resources might we point them towards? So that is yet another means of looking at the R tool from so many different perspectives. All right. Did we do well, Mr. Brandon, with our time?
Phenomenal. Thank you all.
Now you've heard from the designers. Now we're going to move on to the implementators of the R2. And I'm going to start off with Ms. Cosby. Ms. Cosby has worked in education for 30 years as an elementary teacher, a counselor, a middle school assistant principal, an elementary principal and an elementary principal in Jefferson County Public Schools. She is currently serving as the principal of Grace James Academy of Excellence. Ms. Cosby has been awarded the JCPS Middle School Principal of the Year 2022, the Hilliard Lyons Principal Award in 2019, and the Excel Teacher Award in 1999. The next presenter will be Dr. Monica Hunter. She has worked for JCPS since 2004. During her tenure with the district, she's gone from a substitute teacher to her current role as the principal at the W.B.D. Du Bois Academy. She has worked closely with diversity, equity, and poverty programs, divisions of JCPS to develop Afrocentric programming geared towards girls of color, notably Girls on the Rise and the Girls Leadership Academy. I'm going to turn this over for them to talk to us about their implementations using the art tool and culturally responsive pedagogy in their buildings.
You want me to go first?
Yes, Dr. Hunter.
Okay, sure, absolutely. All right, again, my name is Dr. Monica Hunter, and I'm the proud principal of W.E.B. Du Bois Academy, which is the largest public Afrocentric all-male school in the country. And I'm excited about where we are moving going forward. So I want to tell you all a little bit about the school and how we incorporate cultural relevance and cultural responsive teaching throughout our space. So our mission statement is to engage, eliminate barriers, and empower each young man to achieve excellence. And one way that we thought that it was necessary and needful for us to do that is to look at the social and emotional component connected to cultural relevance. And the goal was to debunk the measure in which society has weaponized the Black and brown skin, to let them know how great they are as a Black and brown young man in our space. So we start each day with brotherhood time. It takes about 20 minutes. And during that time, we recite our creed, our leader rules, and discuss our pride values. So I want to share the creed so you can understand the power behind the creed, which also gives our students the confidence they need to walk in their Black and brownness as they go into their classes and even go into the community. So our creed is as follows. I was born to achieve greatness. I will not be defined by my mistakes, but my willingness to accept correction, to learn and grow. My greatness will be a result of my work ethic, mentorship, and support. I will achieve all my goals. I will be accountable for my actions and responsible to positively impact my community. I was born to achieve greatness, and I will determine the king I will become. The reason why that creed is so powerful and so meaningful is because that is the direct opposite of what a lot of them are faced with when they go into the community. So we want to affirm who they are as an excellent Black young man, as an excellent brown young man, as an academic, and a productive member of our society before they even go into academia. Because without that, when they get into the classroom, they'll just be another student in another class. But if they go into it knowing who they are, then the results will show. So over the course of the past 5 years, we've been in existence for 4 or 5 years, we have outgrown all Black and brown males across the district, which is wonderful. And my goal as the new leader is for us to out-achieve the student body in general. So we can grow, but we need to achieve as well. And that is my goal and my charge as the leader of W.B. Du Bois Academy. So the question is, how can they accomplish what is, or how can they manifest? I love the word manifest. How can they manifest what is unpacked within the creed? And that is done through our pride values. So if they have perseverance, resilience, initiative, discipline, and empathy, they will be able to achieve their goals and achieve their greatness. And so one thing I decided that we would do in order for us to ensure that they understand those pride values through the lens of content is underneath their learning target or learning objective every day is the pride value that's connected to the content that they're going to learn for the day. And so any classroom you go into, you'll see that they're looking at the perseverance, they're looking at resilience, they're looking at initiative, someone taking initiative, discipline, or empathy, and students can embody those attributes, those values as they learn their content. So Gloria Ladson-Billing said this about cultural responsive teaching. It's an approach that empowers students intellectually, socially, emotionally, and politically by using cultural reference to impart knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So cultural relevance and cultural responsive teaching is not all about pedagogy and instruction. It's also about empowering them to view themselves as members of the society who are excellent, who have greatness, and who can forge forward in all the things that the creed says they can do. And so that is very vital, especially working with a population that is mainly, and I'll say 95 to 97% Black and brown. We've got to empower them to do this work. We can teach them, we can stand in front of them, we can have all of the answers for all the things in life. But if they don't know who they are within that space, they will not achieve. That's why the social and emotional component is so important. And looking at that also through the lens of political reference and connectivity with the community, we've intentionally partnered with business owners and organizations with Black and brown leaders to come in and show the students who they can become. So it's not just what happens in the classroom, but who they can be once they grow up. Once we go into the post-secondary realm, they see that excellence right now. And so that is one thing that is very vital as well, because if we go into any other traditional school, you'll see staff that does not look like the students, and you'll see partnerships that don't look like the students. And so that is one thing that we've been intentional about, to make sure that we have that connectivity with the community, and so they can see themselves as people of excellence, men of excellence, once it's time for them to spread their wings and fly. And so you would think with us being an Afrocentric school, we would have cultural relevance from door to door, but that is not the case. It's easier for this work to be implemented within the English and social studies classrooms, but it's not so easy in math and science, and sometimes even related arts classes. So I appreciate the resources that we've been able to, that have been provided for us through DEP, to make sure that we can actually see how cultural relevance can take place within those other spaces outside of English and social studies. So one thing that we did in looking at that, we partnered with Brian Smith, who was one of the resource teachers through diversity, equity, poverty programs. And we have what we call R time. So we take the R tool and we have one focus each month. And so, for example, the focus this month is content integration. And so Brian Smith came in, and let me tell you this, we're actually one school in two locations. And so he's only one person. So we have the same presentation every Monday on both campuses. So I have two academic instructional coaches, and they collaborate with Brian Smith to develop the presentation. And the campus that he is not at for each Monday, the opposite academic instructional coach will lead that presentation. So everyone on both campuses will get the same information and have the same accountability system. So the first week we focus on, let's say for our for October, we're focusing on content integration. So there'll be a presentation about content integration in general. And then DEP has a lot of resources connected to their guidebook that teachers can actually do a lot of shopping. They can go in there, they can shop, they can pick out resources, pick out strategies that they want to implement within their content area. And that is what they do the first week. So the first 20 minutes, he gives an overview of that domain. He gives an overview of the indicators connected to that domain, and then they're able to look for resources that they can easily implement within their lessons for the week, that they can actually teach and have that content integration there. The next week, they're actually doing the instruction and pulling student samples. And then once we get to the final week of the month, we do what's called a critical friends protocol. And so not only are they getting the training, this is what it is, but they have to have time. And if I'm just going to be honest, if we don't build in the time, it's not going to happen. Okay. If we don't look at the opportunity and give them space for the opportunity to flourish, it's not going to happen. So we build in that time for them to do that planning. And then we build in that time for them to pull student samples. And then we build in that time for them to give each other feedback on the efficiency, the effectiveness, and how the instruction is delivered through the lens of the student work samples. After that, we move on to the next domain, so knowledge construction. So that is what we're doing at Du Bois to make sure that we master each domain. And so we have a focus each month. So by the end of the school year, they will have mastered each domain across the campus. Every classroom will have the expectation to incorporate strategies connected to each domain or an indicator within each domain, and then have that accountability system where they give each other feedback on the efficiency. So nobody wants to be that one teacher who's not following the plan. So I found that all of them have bought into it, and they're looking for how they can incorporate those strategies within their lessons on a regular basis. So that's what our plan is, to make sure that our tool is done with efficiency. We've also partnered with DEP to do what we call equity walkthroughs. And so we've had one round already. And I'll be honest, the data wasn't the best, but it was after we just got started with school, and we had just started the training as well. So I am optimistic that as we go through the year, not only will they see this work in the ELA and social studies classrooms, but they'll see it in all classrooms when they do their visits, and we calibrate the Afrocentric and the cultural responsive and relevant work done within our space. So again, I said before that we have outgrown Black and brown boys across the district. But my goal, if we teach relevance, if we teach looking at cultural responsiveness, then they will perform, they will achieve, because they will become one with the instruction. So the last thing I'm going to share is I have a victory. There was a teacher at the high school who was talking about climate change. And of course, the students, they were, rah-rah and okay, well, whatever. We don't really, care about climate change. What does it have to do with us? And then he talked about his wife and how she had a position with an organization within the city. And I'm not going to name the organization, but she was tasked with planting trees in the West End. Her budget was less than half the budget of the East End. And so any given day over the summer, and this wasn't this past summer, but whenever she actually held the position a couple of years ago, and it was all over the news, but any given day over the summer, the temperature would be 7 to 10 degrees higher in the West End than the East End. And she ended up quitting her job because of the inequity. So once the students realized that, they wanted to learn more about climate change. They wanted to learn more about the organization, and then they wanted to do something about it. They got that social justice piece as well. Now, will things change? I don't know. But what I do know is that they understood the content, and they appreciated the content more because they saw themselves, it was relevant to them. They saw themselves within that instruction and within that pedagogy. So that is the power behind cultural relevance and cultural responsive teaching in action. So that's a little bit about W.E.B. Du Bois, how we've incorporated our tool, and how we've partnered with DEP to make sure that we are moving towards relevance from wall to wall on both campuses.
Thank you, Dr. Hunter. Can we now move on to Ms. Cosby? Is she on? I haven't seen a photograph of her. Is she with us? Okay.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hello, I'm Rhonda Cosby. I'm the principal at Grace James Academy. We are in our 3rd year of existence. As you all know, we started our brand new school online during the beginning of COVID. This is our 2nd year in person. And we have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and we plan to grow through 12th grade. To be very clear about what we're about, every decision that we make is based on the mission and vision and our core values. So our mission is to empower, activate, and illuminate academic excellence in each and every gym through an Afrocentric and gender-specific STEAM curriculum. And I'll go into a little bit about that in a moment. Our vision, where we want to reach in the next few years, is Grace James girls excelling in math and science will boldly conquer limitless possibilities. And if you've ever walked in our school, this generation of students, they already come with the boldness. They now have the place in the space to express that boldness without getting in trouble or being to this or to that. Our crown values, our crown values are twofold. One, yes, we value collaboration, resilience, originality, willingness, narrative, and of course, sisterhood. But within that is where our social emotional learning occurs. That is priority at Grace James. It is not everything, because not only do we want them to be whole socially, emotionally, but we also want them to reach academic excellence. So having a balance, with the two. But because sense of belonging for both girls and boys in most larger districts is so low compared to their peers, our focus is to pour into our students and peel back whatever negative stereotypes have been projected onto them that they may have subconsciously taken in because of how they have been schooled, not educated, schooled. So our social emotional focus every morning, first thing is what we call sister circle. And sister circles are based on the larger gym community. So each gym community is part of our crown values. So we have collaboration gym community, we have a resilience gym community, and so forth. Within those communities, there is an adult who then takes 10 to 13 gyms to sister circle. So it's that smaller, intimate space so that there's an adult that is connected to every single student. And that's where the real work of the social and emotional, the Afrocentric framework, complaining about the bus driver, learning organizational skills, executive functioning skills. But I have 6 girls and they have been with me since 6th grade. I will be with them if they continue on into high school. So each sister circle belongs under an umbrella of a gym community, and gym communities meet every Thursday. Once a month, we meet as one crown, one sisterhood. All gym communities come together. We have some friendly competition between our gym communities. If you think about the Harry Potter houses or sororities, that's kind of how we function in our building. So our focus at Grace James, we have 4 foci: the Afrocentric, gender-specific, STEAM, and rigor. Afrocentric, we follow the 6 themes of the Afrocentric framework, which we borrowed from Dr. LeGarrette King out of the University of Missouri. We've kind of tweaked it a little bit because we had to scaffold it for each grade level for this year, and that was driven by our teachers. We have no bought and paid for curriculum. Our teachers are building the curriculum each year on their own using district resources and feedback from our students, because they are the ones who are receiving the Afrocentric instruction, and they tell us what they want to learn, and they push and challenge us on a regular basis. Each framework has a driving question to help our students see themselves, their histories, and the world around them through multiple perspectives. I can't emphasize that enough. I don't know if it was Dr. Cook or LaManda who spoke on the importance of multiple perspectives and culturally responsive teaching. One thing that we all know, how we were taught all over the United States, is one perspective, and it was very, very biased. And so making sure that our students can be critical of what's brought to them by making them understand every situation that has occurred. There's a perspective that may not be of your own, but you have to understand all perspectives in all situations. Gender specific is not really about girls talk more, none of those stereotypes, but it's really about empowering student voice, choice, and agency. For so many years, girls of color, more specifically Black girls, are shunned or made to feel less than or inferior because we are perceived or projected onto perceived as loud, aggressive, angry, and it's not seen as a positive. We don't have a choice but to be louder and aggressive. And yes, sometimes I am angry, but that doesn't make the totality of who I am as a human being, because I'm in a world that doesn't even see me. So we really want our girls to know that they can have a voice and to be able to articulate their needs when they're sitting at the table representing all other women. And as they get older and in situations where they have to be known and heard, but we have to pour into them, because prior to coming to us, they may not have had the affirmations and the support that they had in their previous schools, because that's not something that has been valued. We'll just be okay, we'll just tough it out. And that is something that we're trying to dismantle from our girls, because sometimes we get tired. I don't know about y'all, but sometimes I get tired and don't have any problem saying it. And then, of course, we are a STEAM school: science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And rigor is an overused word. I like to say the criticality or critical thinking. The cognitive load should be on students and not the teachers. The teachers shouldn't be walking out of the building exhausted every day. It should be the students. So what are we doing in our classrooms to challenge our students in order to think and problem solve? And not just spoon feed them. And so one thing that, One thing that we do with the R tool in our Afrocentric framework is, so here's an example. We use the inquiry design model, which is not telling kids what to think. It is providing them resources and asking them questions so that they can seek knowledge for themselves or question and challenge themselves, versus just being passive learners in the classroom, which is what school has been like for the last 200 years. And we still perpetuate that in many schools today. So we have 6 units. The first unit of the first 6 weeks of the year is we all focus on identity. We talk about identity in Sister Circle and gym community and art and PE and music and dance, science, social studies, language arts, in all areas of the building. Everyone knows that we focus on identity. The second one is humanity, which is what we're in right now. The third one is social justice and oppression. The fourth one is the African diaspora. The next one is intersectionality. And the last one is Black love. Because a lot of times when you talk about cultural relevant curriculum, you only want to talk about things, the negative things that happen to us. Yes, we need to bring that awareness to our students, and not just Black and brown students. We have to educate the whole world, because that part was never in our schools in the first place. But we have to make sure that what we share is that we are a whole culture, and that we have many things that are positive about us as a culture, and not what has been bestowed upon us as, gloom and doom, and that we've persevered and we've been very resilient. And here we are, we're still here, not going anywhere. So within this framework, it really helps, because every 6 weeks, the teachers have to create the framework. A unit. So this unit is a humanity unit. Our teachers decided this year we need to have a driving question per grade level, so it's not repetitive. And then, of course, these are our standards. They stage the question, and they have to come up with supporting questions. And so it's open-ended, and it's not narrow in its focus. So these are some supporting questions. And then within that, they have the performance task. Backpack skills are right here embedded. So this one is they're creating a guide to learn about religion with compassion, create an educational podcast, writing a claim, supporting evidence, which is right along with the standards within this grade level. and then the teachers share their sources, and then they have to, share with us their STEAM connections, their rigor strategies, and their gender-specific strategies. Then once the teacher turns this in, then within PLC, they have to present their unit. And we do this every 3 weeks. We pay them to stay after school to write their units. Then we use this rubric. Oh, it's not going to let me do it, is it? Move out of the way. Oh, here we go. Okay, so this is the rubric. So the teachers have to deconstruct the standard. And then here's our R tool integration. So in order to gain points or feedback based on each component of our units, we are using the different components of the R tool. And so this helps the teachers who are new in creating lessons and activities and units to go along with our Afrocentric curriculum or culturally relevant curriculum. They have to become familiar with the R tool, and the R tool, as well as the REAP, is extremely helpful because it is not subjective. It is very objective. These are the components, and let's look at your lesson. And if my students can't see themselves in there or see others, within that unit of study or perspective of others, then what are you doing? So with science and math are a little bit more tough to bring out the cultural relevancy, but math historically has not been treated as a humane subject. It is more technical, dry numbers. But when you add in things like Dr. Hunter mentioned, statistics and data that represent marginalized communities and inequities, then math becomes more relevant and connected, and I understand it more. One of my math teachers created his identity unit focusing on geometry. He used the different ways that our girls get their hair braided, whether it's with triangles or squares. And he tied that to the geometry and why a triangle is stronger than a square. And he didn't know the answer, but you know who did? His students. And they taught him. And it is okay for students to teach the adults about who they are. But the adults have to be open to knowing what they don't know. And if we could change that mindset, that we learn as much from them as they are from us. And I want to make sure that we understand that cultural relevant pedagogy and teaching is not just to make sure our brown and Black students understand, where they came from and who they come from, but it is also to educate the non-Black and white students and educators about cultures outside of themselves. So again, it goes back to that the multiple perspectives that have historically been left out of the schoolhouse because someone may get their feelings hurt or someone may be offended. Well, we've been offended for quite some time. And it's not about offending, it's about educating. And that is something that I think is absolutely necessary in order for us to have a society that can think critically for themselves and not hear or follow the lead of somebody that just says anything or follow a commentator on TV, but to really question and think critically about any information that's brought to you. That's the true nature of education. We have schooled them, but they're not being educated. And you have people who, well, I have my master's degree, well, I have my doctorate. Yeah, but do your students and are you aware of others outside of yourself? Are you empathetic? Can you think critically? Or are you living on the fact that you've never had a hardship in your life and you have a degree? No, that's not good quality teaching. It's schooling, it's not educating. And that's what we need to emphasize more than anything, is to educate. And I know our Department of Equity works tirelessly to provide resources for teachers in the district. getting everyone on the same page and having the mindset that it is necessary work in order to truly transform our society is the hardest part. Now, Ian, I'm going to be done in a second because I know you're like, oh, Lord, have mercy. But I want to end with this quote, okay? Education either function as an instrument which is used to facilitate integration of the younger generation into the logic of the present system and bring about conformity, which is what we've done for the last 200 years, or it becomes the practice of freedom, that the means by which men and women deal critically and creatively with reality and discover how to participate in the transformation of their world. Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And anytime you all want to come visit Grace James, please come. And I'm hiring if you need a job.
Thank you. That is, I really have some questions, and I hate for you to take that down, because what really, one of the questions, and we have 20 minutes of a Q&A, and I want to thank you all for sharing. Now, remember, you can put your questions in the chat, or you can let Ian and I know by raising your hand that you have a question. And we will let you ask that question, but we only have 20 minutes, and this has been really, really enjoyable to listen to both the principals talking about how they implementing it in our schools. And one of the questions, I'm going to begin with one of them, and I want to ask the principals this. Because I agree, Ms. Cosby, that it's about having students to look at things critically and be able to make sound decisions based on information. But I really want to know from you, what achievement outcomes have your school witnessed from using a cultural responsive curriculum?
I want to say it's not only coupled with the culturally responsive curriculum, but it goes back to that social emotional place with sense of belonging. You can't speak on achievement of Black and brown children until you talk about their sense of belonging and their sense of self-worth. And then you add in the culturally responsive curriculum, because now I have a place where I belong and I don't feel inferior, and I'm seen and heard and I'm valued for what I bring to the table, my culture assets and my intellect. Then you couple that with the culture responsive pedagogy, the self-esteem is way up. They're a lot more comfortable, 10,000 times more confident. And they're willing to take risks because the people in the classroom value who they are as human beings. And so we've seen an increase with our MAP data in reading and math from fall last year to fall this year, because last year was probably the first full solid year we had during COVID. And we can stop saying during COVID because this is our life. So from fall to fall, we had an increase in our growth of students, which is what we should be doing, is growing our students from this fall to last fall. And then we just recently got our KSA scores out, but they're embargoed, so I can't share that. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, when our gyms are in college, no one is going to know what they made on MAP. No one's going to know what they made on KSA, but are they empathetic? Can they persevere in tough times? Can they problem solve? Can they have a critical, intellectually stimulating conversations? Can they question and challenge in spaces that need to be questioned and challenged? Yes. And don't get me wrong, we need assessments to kind of know, are we doing what we need to do to see whether or not our students are growing and developing. But it cannot be the end all be all to determine the destiny or the level or the intellect of our students. So yes, we are growing our students. Yes, they are achieving within our school, but there are bigger and larger systems outside of us. Even with culturally relevant pedagogy, we still have to take the KSA. Even with culturally relevant responsive teaching, you still have the human element, where that teacher is, they can maybe create a phenomenal lesson that integrates all the students in the classroom within the lesson. But if they cannot relate and connect to the student, then it's a waste of time. Because a lot of people, oh, she's an excellent teacher. She's an excellent teacher. But can't nobody learn from people they don't like.
Amen.
Or who project onto them their version of what school should be. These are children, yes, all the way up to 12th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Stop treating them like they're menaces to society or adultifying them. So as much as, I think I said this a minute ago, as much as DEP works to provide resources and all those things, they have a bigger obstacle in front of it, and that's the mindset of the people who can make the stuff happen in the buildings with the full implementation to fidelity, and not just lip service and checking some boxes. But until people are ready to open up and be real and acknowledge that the way we have educated or schooled our kids has not changed, then nothing's going to change. They're going to be spinning their wheels. And if you had a testimonial time, they can tell you, as many schools as they've been into, how hard the work is. Now, we've come a long way, but we got a long way to go. I hope I answered your question.
You did. You did.
Okay.
With passion. With passion. I have a question for our developers. How soon will culturally responsive curriculums be implemented in our schools, and especially in the dual resides that will occur next year? And how much work are you all doing at this time, seeing that that's going to be done? Any one of you all can answer that question.
I'll kind of kick us off, but I trust both of my colleagues to chime in. As Dr. Cosby and Dr. Hunter have illustrated, we do have pockets of culturally responsive teaching already happening. That's the reality. We have some amazing classroom educators. We also are fortunate to have some amazing school leaders. The larger question, though, of full implementation may not be something that we can necessarily answer ourselves, because we are not Miss Michelle Dillard. She's our Chief Academic Officer. She's the head of teaching and learning, which is where our curriculum design and learning innovation team lives. But as we've seen tonight, this work is happening, and we will continue to push and make sure that we are making those connections, coaching up our educators and supporting our school leaders, especially in that dual resides area as we are able. Lamanda, I saw that you unmuted, I think right after I did, so I'm going to be quiet and let you add to that however you see fit.
I'm just going to add on. You mentioned coaching up teachers and it happening in pockets. And so something that DEP has done is thought about finding those teachers who are already implementing culturally responsive instruction and pedagogy in their classrooms, and then kind of lifting them up as an example. So we have a couple of cohorts happening that have happened over the past couple of years, where we are specifically working with teachers at different levels, helping them to develop culturally relevant curriculum so that it is an exemplar for other teachers to kind of take and use as a model in their school. And that is something that is available to all teachers within the teacher backpack, which is where we house all of our resources. So if teachers are scared, if teachers are unsure, if teachers want an example, it's there for them. It's just they have to access that. So there are, again, pockets happening. We would love to see more of that. And hopefully some of the information that we have, or all the information that we have, will help support that. But we always need more teachers who are willing to teach in this way.
Ian, do
I
you
think
have a
just one
question?
small exciting thing I'll add to what my colleagues have shared is that that body of work, that body of exemplars continues to grow as more and more people become aware or more comfortable or more fluent in using these supports that are out there. And there's no greater joy for the three of us than to be able to coach individuals, but then witness how those pockets continue to grow and grow. But to points that have been previously made, we've begun the work, but we're nowhere close to getting where we need to be. And so we continue to push, we continue to grow, but that requires awareness, that requires some risk taking from some folks, and it continues to grow.
You know, I have this question. You know, the success of any school depends on the leadership. Okay, strongly the leadership in the building. And you all have given us two wonderful leaders tonight to listen to, but they are exceptions to the rule. Those two women are, okay? But I want to know, how do you all in DP and DEP bring on leaders who are resistant to this for whatever reason? How do y'all work in that situation using your ARC tool? Because I feel at a disadvantage right now, because I wish I had that document to read to know so I could ask you all more questions about it. But how do you bring that principle? Because if he doesn't or she doesn't believe in it, then it's not going to happen. So how do y'all do that?
So something I will speak to is not so much as our thinking about our level leaders as they are the leaders of our principals. Something that we do have in place is Dr. Marshall has what he calls real meetings. And so in these real meetings, we have, you know, conversation starters and discussions around racial equity topics, because we know if we're not talking about this, if we're not getting comfortable with that discomfort, we're not going to grow. And so in those meetings, we have the opportunity to unpack some information with our level leaders, have discussions, ask questions, gain clarity, so that is a process that they can replicate with their principals. And we know that, of course, the leaders have to be on board in order for this to, in order for things to change, in order for us to see what we want to see. So that is just one thing that we are doing, along with, you know, book studies that happen, you know, among principals. So there are things that are happening. It may not be specifically with the R tool, because that is something that we're using, you know, in our planning when we're planning with teachers, but we do need our principals to be aware of and apprised of and be able to coach through that document. And so hopefully we'll have more opportunities in the future to kind of have some of those discussions with principals. But as far as it goes with making sure that our level leaders are able to, you know, engage with this work and coach their principals, those are just a few of the things that we have in place. And team, I know I've left something out, so please.
Ian?
I'm not sure you've left anything out major, other than when we talk about the language of the racial equity policy, it holds so many different individuals accountable, and there really isn't any group of folks who are left out by that. And so that's worth studying, it's worth looking at. But I think that means that we also need to continue to make our supports known and to make channels of communication as open as possible, and to say I'm here to call you in and work with you, and to make it abundantly evident that we have time, we have resources, we want to do the work right alongside these folks.
I think, Rachel, what you just said is really important. A lot of people, because the R tool is intrinsically tied to constructions of race, and because the work that the Department of Diversity, Equity, and Poverty does is inherently tied to the racial equity policy, some people can kind of have their guard up when we first enter a space. And So part of it too is breaking down that barrier. I'm not a monster. I'm not coming to judge you. I understand that we're growing through this together, because for the first time we are starting to see the type of schools that we should have always had. No one is fully equipped to lead in this work because we didn't get to live this work as students. We are building things that are brand new in this district, and it is marvelous to see. But part of it is definitely accepting the human aspect of this work and not necessarily calling people out, but being prepared to call them in and say that you can do better and you do know better. So let's figure out what that looks like in your school for your students.
Thank you.
You
Ian,
guys,
question?
yeah, you guys mentioned as far as the implementation of the art tool, you mentioned briefly the self work, right? Is the self work tied to embedding the art tool within the curriculum? And if so, how?
I just
So
didn't want to step over either of my colleagues. Lamanda, go ahead. I put what I wanted to share in the chat, so you go ahead and take it.
So when I think of the art tool, there are observable aspects, things that the teacher will do, things that we want to make sure that are present in our classroom. But then there's also the self-work. Again, I think my colleagues have mentioned, continuously checking your biases. This is something that has to happen continuously in order to become fluid with it. So as we're sitting in professional learning communities and we're planning instruction, we're looking at the materials and the resources that we're going to use and trying to decide which of these are going to be best for our kids. As we have those conversations, it's our job to do some checking of our colleagues. So if someone says something, or if there's something apparent in the material, we need to have discussion about that. If someone says something that we need to unpack, then we need to make sure that we unpack that in that professional learning community, because that's going to be a barrier to us moving forward. So there is work built in the art tool for teachers to do continuously, for our principals to help support our teachers to do. And one of those things are actively checking our biases and being kind of that lens when it comes to planning that curriculum and thinking about what we place in front of our students. We were at a school not too long, probably early this week, for there was some professional development happening. And there was a book in the classroom that I just so happened to pick up. And it caught my eye because it had African American on it. So I just picked it up. And as I'm looking, it's talking about African American music. And it mentioned just something in there about religion. You all, a little bit, forgive me, but this is something that we think about our students having that criticality and that critical thinking skills. And so a passage in the text said that the enslaved were brought to the United States, and they ended up converting to Christianity because it was like their religions in Africa. And so a student picking up that book, do they have the wherewithal to know that, one, they chose a different religion because it was safer for them, it was something that was maybe going to help them get their freedom? If our students aren't able to have those kind of conversations with their teachers, and their teachers helping them to unpack that, that's a part of all of that work. And so that was just something that kind of hit me as, this is very timely. This is exactly what we want our kids to do, is find this information and question it, and then decide how best to move forward.
Lamanda, I want to bring back what Ms. Cosby shared about her students, and something that we talk about a lot. And it is that your teachers are learning as much from the students as they are hopefully learning from their teachers. And when we allow that and we break the ego down and we say we have as much or more to learn from our kids, then they start to become kind of a living embodiment of the curriculum itself. And so we have to allow our students to be honest with us, which means a degree of vulnerability that perhaps in traditional teacher prep programs you're not told about. And so you have these classroom management courses and you have these theory courses, but we need these pre-service individuals to hear some different messages. It's long overdue. And when some of that pre-work is done prior to entering education, then we can continue to mold our newer teachers to really start to embrace and then begin to embody this work themselves. So it's so important for that vulnerability, so we can say, you know what, I was wrong, let's learn together. And that's so critical, and it sounds easy, but it's not as easy as it sounds.
I need to go back to the principals. I have a question for you all. What additional funding is needed to implement this type of curriculum? And are you getting it?
So there's not really any additional funding that's needed because the teachers have the autonomy to create what they need to create based on the priority standards or the state standards, and along with the our tool and the connectivity to the Black and Brown experience through pedagogy. What is needed is the time for them to actually do the work outside of school. Like Ms. Cosby said, I'm giving them time to plan those units, giving them time to unpack the standards, giving them time to connect the expectation of teaching cultural responsive pedagogy through their instructional practices, and make sure that they are teaching the grade level standards as well. It's the money for time. And for the past couple of years, we have had ESSER funds. I don't know how Ms. Cosby was paying her staff, but we have had ESSER funds that we were able to use for this work. Moving forward, I don't know where the funding would come for that type of work. I do know that because our schools are special, there are sometimes funds that are set aside to make sure that we can do the work that we need to do for our students. But looking at the district holistically, there are, as far as I know, there are no funds for that type of work. Now, DEP does offer professional development opportunities for teachers to learn how to do this work, but I think the money will be best spent giving them time to actually putting the work into practice. And so I'm not sure where that funding would come from, to be honest.
Okay. I got another one for you. Let's say I'm a parent. How do I support the cultural curriculum in your schools? How do I do that from my home?
Well, one thing, our communities are a little bit different than the traditional schools across the district. I was at 2 other schools last year, and there was a lot of pushback because there was a lack of knowledge behind the power behind teaching culturally responsibly or cultural relevance through the lens of cultural relevance. And so the first thing that our parents can do, especially the parents that are not Black and Brown, is to have an open mind that their child and their demographic is not the only one in the space. And so I remember there are times during NTI where parents would literally get on to the lesson or get onto the class and say, I don't want my child to learn about that. Why are they learning that? What does that have to do with the standards? It has all the things to do with the standards because we have to look at the multiple perspectives, and they can only think critically if they're thinking outside of their own lens. That's when they think critically. That's when they can talk about those other perspectives. That's when they can take themselves outside of who they are and go into the space of the mirrors and the windows. So having an open mind is the first step, and understanding that the expectations for their child to achieve, and if their child is achieving, then there is no problem here. So having that open mind, and instead of pushing back, try to understand, try to have empathy, and be that space that their child may need because if they come from a home that is not inclusive, if they come from a home that pushes back on diversity, then the child wouldn't feel comfortable in the space either. So it's not just something that we can fix. It's not something that just exposing them to these different or multiple perspectives can fix. The parent has to be open. The parent has to be a space for empathy as well in their home, so they can go into the classroom. And because I have had students that say, well, I can't complete that project because my mom said that I can't, or I can't do this because my dad said that I can't. And that is the real behind schools that don't look like ours. So having an open mind, having empathy and acceptance of people that don't look like them. That's where they can start with, you know, the inclusion and equity work that the district is not just moving towards, has landed on.
We have used our 20 minutes up, and I would love to ask more. I have about 18 questions here, and I would love to ask more, but I have to stop. But I want to, first of all, thank you all for being here with us tonight. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Brandon, and he's going to talk about the November forum.
Thank you, Ms. Patrick. So our next forum will be November the 10th, Thursday, again at 6 p.m. The topic will be what parents and the community can expect from the new position within JCPS school communities, the safety administrators. So I will drop the link to register for that forum in the chat momentarily. So if you're interested, please click that link. And as well, to mention again, we do have a link for you to fill out to give us feedback. So your feedback is critical for us. We love to hear what you think of the forum itself, in addition to the material and content that has been presented. So again, thank you all for participating and joining tonight. And I will put these links in the chat for you all now. Thank you.
This concludes our forum for tonight. Again, it was wonderful meeting each one of you all, and I plan to take you up, Ms. Cosby, on coming to visit. I plan to do that, and I look forward to our next forum in November. Good night, be safe, and get vaccinated.
Ian, you don't need anything from myself or Lamanda, do you?
I do not need a thing. Thank you all. Phenomenal job. Very
Thank
informative.
you so much, Ian. We
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Have a good one.
You too. Thanks, guys.